In a world where prejudice can shatter lives in an instant, one woman's courage turned a story of betrayal into a tale of triumph. Richard Hallstrom's voice thundered through the vaulted living room, shaking the air like a gunshot. "You filthy black dog! Are you trying to kill my daughter? Get out now!" The words cut through the late afternoon light streaming in from the Pacific. Maya William froze, her hand steadying 8-year-old Sophie's small shoulders. The child's lips hovered over a glass of thick brown liquid, steam curling faintly above its surface. The earthy, pungent scent filled the space. What happens when a father's rage blinds him to the truth? Stay tuned to BUP Stories to find out. Richard's fury exploded. He charged forward, slamming into Maya with such force that she stumbled back. The glass flew from her hand, splashing its contents across her blouse and the Persian rug. Without thinking, Richard snatched Sophie into his arms. "You dare feed her this filth," he roared. Sophie whimpered, startled. "Daddy!" Richard didn't let her finish. "We're going to the hospital," he snapped, shouting toward the hallway. "Thomas, car now." Turning back to Maya, rage burning in his eyes, he grabbed a fistful of her hair and yanked her head back. "You evil black witch, always scheming to hurt others. Even a child isn't safe from you." Maya's breath caught in her throat, her voice trembling but urgent. "Mr. Hallstrom, please." She drank something dangerous. "I'm trying to save her." "Save her?" Richard spat. "By poisoning her?" Her eyes glistened. "If you don't let me, she could shut your mouth," he barked, shoving her away so hard she hit the arm of the sofa. Sophie clung to him, breathing unevenly. Can a single act of compassion overcome years of mistrust? Keep watching BUP Stories to uncover the shocking truth. Her small body felt too warm in his arms. He carried her out to the waiting SUV, Maya following a few hesitant steps before he turned, stabbing the air with his finger. "You're not coming. Stay away from my family." At the hospital, Richard paced outside the exam room, every nerve stretched thin. He imagined Sophie's throat burned raw, imagined every possible outcome except the one that was true. When the doors opened, Dr. David Larson emerged, mask hanging from one ear. "Rich," he said evenly, "she's stable, but you owe someone an apology." Richard's brow furrowed. "What are you talking about?" She, David interrupted. "Saved your daughter. Sophie got into a spray bottle of bleach, likely under your kitchen sink. She took a sip before realizing that herbal drink Maya gave her was a neutralizing antidote. It slowed the chemical reaction before you even brought her in." If you feel for the characters in this story, like this video and comment where you're watching from, because maybe someone near you is watching BUP Stories too. The hallway swayed under Richard's feet. "You're telling me, I'm telling you that without Maya's quick action, we'd be talking about permanent damage to her esophagus or worse." Richard stood in stunned silence, David's words echoing in his skull. The image of Maya's tear-filled eyes, her pleading voice, slammed into him like a wave. A few hours later, Sophie was settled into a recovery room, in her arm. Richard sat beside her bed, holding her hand gently. She looked up at him with sleepy eyes. "Daddy," she whispered, "you were mean to Maya." Richard's throat tightened. "Sweetheart, I thought she was hurting you." Sophie shook her head weakly. "No, I drank from the wrong bottle. It tasted weird. Then Maya ran in and made me drink that brown stuff. She said it would help. She made me drink fast, even though I didn't want to. Then my tummy stopped hurting so much." Richard exhaled slowly, shame settling in his chest like lead. "She saved you?" "Yes," Sophie said simply. Not long after, Maya stepped quietly into the room, hesitating at the doorway. She still wore the same blouse, now stained dark from the earlier spill, her posture cautious, her gaze flicking between Sophie and Richard. Richard rose to his feet. For a moment, neither spoke. Then, in a voice steady but low, he said, "Maya, I owe you more than I can ever repay. I was wrong about you, about everything I said. I am deeply sorry." Maya's eyes softened, but she said nothing at first. Finally, I didn't do it for you, Mr. Hallstrom. I did it for her. I know, Richard said, his tone sincere. That's exactly why I want you to stay. Not as a housemaid, as Sophie's full-time nanny. With a salary that reflects your value here, and from now on, you'll be treated with the respect you deserve. Sophie smiled faintly, her small voice breaking the tension. Does that mean Maya gets to read me stories at bedtime? Richard glanced at Maya. Only if she agrees. Maya managed a small smile. I'd like that very much. In that quiet hospital room, with the beeping monitor keeping time, Richard felt something shift inside him. The walls he had built around his trust began to crumble, not because of an apology, but because of the truth his daughter had spoken without hesitation. Maya had saved Sophie's life. And in a way Richard hadn't expected, she had saved a part of him, too. The following morning, the house felt different. The usual cool stillness of the Hallstrom estate had been replaced by a faint hum of movement. Richard stood in the kitchen, still in his robe, staring out at the Pacific as the early sun stretched gold over the waves. He had barely slept. Images from the previous day played over and over in his mind, his own rage, Maya's tearful face, Sophie's pale but trusting eyes. The soft sound of footsteps pulled him back. Maya entered quietly, wearing clean clothes, her hair neatly pulled back. She moved toward the counter to prepare Sophie's breakfast, her motions deliberate, as though she were weighing every step. Richard cleared his throat. You're here early, he said, his tone more awkward than accusatory. She didn't look at him. You asked me to be full-time. That means I start the day before she's awake. He nodded, feeling the sting of her detachment. Maya. She finally glanced at him, her dark eyes unreadable. I want you to know, he continued, I meant what I said at the hospital. The position, the respect, it wasn't just a moment of guilt. I trust you with Sophie. Her lips pressed into a thin line, but she gave a small nod. Then let me do my job. Before he could reply, Sophie bounded in, still in her pajamas, her hair a messy halo. Maya, she squealed, throwing herself into Maya's arms. The woman's stern expression softened instantly. She crouched down to hug Sophie tightly. Good morning, sunshine, Maya said warmly. How are you feeling? Better, Sophie replied. But the doctor said I have to be careful. Richard watched the exchange, a strange warmth spreading in his chest. It had been a long time since he'd seen Sophie greet someone with that kind of joy. He wondered how he had missed the bond forming between them in just 3 weeks. Maya guided Sophie to the table and set down a small plate, scrambled eggs, sliced strawberries, and a piece of whole grain toast cut into the shape of a heart. Sophie's eyes lit up. You made this for me? Of course, Maya smiled. Food tastes better when it's made with love. Richard noted the ease with which Sophie picked up her fork, taking small bites without complaint. It was a far cry from the girl who used to push her plate away untouched. After breakfast, Maya took Sophie upstairs to get ready for the day. Richard remained in the kitchen, staring at the empty dishes. The past few years had been a blur of corporate acquisitions, shareholder meetings, and meticulously controlled schedules. He had believed he was protecting Sophie by keeping her world predictable and safe. Now he wasn't so sure. Later that morning, Richard found Maya in the garden. She was kneeling in the soil, planting herbs in the raised beds near the kitchen windows. Mint, chamomile, ginger, she explained without looking up. It's good for her digestion. Helps calm her nerves. You're making this place your own, Richard said, his voice almost a challenge. Maya sat back on her heels and looked at him steadily. I'm making it a place where Sophie can grow healthy. That's my only intention. He crossed his arms. You have to understand, I've spent years keeping her safe. I've seen people try to take advantage. Money changes the way people treat you. Her gaze didn't waver. And prejudice changes the way you see people before you even know them. The words struck him like a dart. He opened his mouth to respond, but Sophie's laughter rang out from the patio. She was playing with the housekeeper's dog, tossing a ball across the lawn. For a moment, the tension between them dissolved into silence as they both watched Thomas leaving the house unusually still. "You ready?" she asked, her tone calm, but her eyes betraying the weight of the moment. "As ready as I'll ever be," Richard replied. He took in the steadiness in her posture, the way she held her head high. She had endured more than most people could imagine. Yet, here she was, walking into the final act of this battle without flinching. The courthouse was packed when they arrived. The press lined the steps, microphones thrust forward, but Harris and a pair of officers cleared a path for them. Inside, the atmosphere was taut with anticipation. Friends of Belle sat on one side of the gallery, Maya's supporters on the other, with a handful of journalists scribbling notes in between. Belle entered, flanked by guards, wearing an ill-fitting suit that had lost its authority along with him. His eyes swept the room and lingered briefly on Maya, a look halfway between defiance and something darker, resentment laced with disbelief that she had bested him. The judge called the court to order and began the formalities. Belle's attorney made a last-ditch plea for leniency, arguing that his client had contributed to the community for decades and that prison time would serve no constructive purpose. The argument rang hollow in the heavy silence of the room. Then it was the prosecution's turn. The DA laid it out with precision: the intimidation, the false accusations, the paid witnesses, and the lasting harm to Maya's life and reputation. This was not a momentary lapse in judgment, the DA concluded. This was a deliberate campaign to destroy an innocent woman. The court must send a message that such abuse of power will not be tolerated. The judge nodded and invited victim impact statements. Harris gave a brief one, factual and steady, before turning the floor over to Maya. She stood, her hands lightly clasped in front of her, and walked to the podium. "Your Honor," she began, her voice carrying clearly in the stillness. "I have spent years trying to outrun what Gregory Bell did to me. He stole more than my job. He tried to steal my voice, my reputation, my place in the world. And for a long time, he succeeded. But the truth survived. I survived. This sentencing isn't just for me. It's for every person who's been told they are powerless against someone with influence. Power without accountability is dangerous, and it must end here." When she returned to her seat, Richard caught the faintest tremor in her hands, but her gaze was unwavering. The judge delivered the sentence with measured authority: 10 years in state prison for witness tampering and conspiracy, plus financial restitution for defamation. "Mr. Bell," the judge said, "you have used your position to intimidate and harm. This court will not allow such actions to go unanswered. Justice demands accountability." Bell's jaw tightened, but he said nothing as the bailiffs moved in. The sound of the gavel echoed through the room like a final door slamming shut. Outside the courthouse, cameras flashed, voices shouted questions, but Richard shielded Maya with a protective hand at her back. She answered only one. "Do you feel justice has been served?" a reporter called out. "Yes," Maya said simply. "Justice and peace." They returned to the estate in the early afternoon. Sophie was waiting on the porch, bouncing on her toes. "Is it over?" she asked. "It's over," Maya said, kneeling to hug her. That evening, the house felt different, lighter, as if every wall had exhaled. Richard and Maya shared a quiet dinner after Sophie went to bed. There was no need for many words. The victory was in the silence, in the absence of fear, in the understanding that they had walked through fire and come out the other side intact. After dinner, they stepped out onto the veranda, the ocean stretching dark and endless before them, the moon casting a silver path over the waves. Richard leaned on the railing, glancing at her. "You know, this could be a turning point, not just for you, but for us." Maya tilted her head. "Us? You and Sophie, part of this family. Not because of what we've been through, but because of what we're building now." She smiled faintly. "Then let's build something worth protecting." They stood together in the quiet, the salty breeze tugging at their clothes. Somewhere far away, the last remnants of Belle's shadow were dissolving into the night. What lay ahead was unknown, but it was theirs to shape, and for the first time in years, the horizon looked wide open. In the weeks following Belle's sentencing, life at the estate began to shift into a rhythm that felt almost foreign after so many months of tension. The fear that had lingered like a stubborn shadow was finally gone, replaced by a cautious kind of peace. For the first time in years, Maya could walk into town without feeling every pair of eyes on her. The mornings became their own ritual. Richard would rise early, sipping coffee on the veranda as the first blush of sunlight touched the waves. Maya would join him soon after, often with Sophie in tow, her hair a wild mess from sleep. They'd eat breakfast together, pancakes or eggs, sometimes fruit and muffins, and then the day would unfurl, no longer dictated by legal appointments or courtroom appearances. Still, healing was not instantaneous. One Saturday morning, as Maya took Sophie to the park, she noticed a man standing by the edge of the playground, watching a little too intently. Her chest tightened until she realized it was just a father waiting for his daughter. She forced herself to smile and breathe, reminding herself that the danger was behind them. That evening, over dinner, she mentioned it to Richard. "I guess it'll take some time for my instincts to relax," she admitted. "It's not a weakness," he said. "It's the habit of survival. But now we can turn that into something else, awareness, not fear." A few days later, Richard surprised her with an idea. "There's a community center in town. They've been looking for someone to help with youth programs, mentoring, tutoring, just being there for kids who don't have much. You'd be perfect." Maya hesitated. "I don't know if I'm ready to put myself out there like that." "You don't have to decide today," he said gently. "But think about it. You've been through something most people can't even imagine. Maybe your story could help someone else survive theirs." The thought stayed with her. That night, she lay awake, staring at the ceiling, hearing her grandmother's voice in her mind, "What we survive, we pass forward. It's how we honor it." 2 weeks later, she walked into the community center and offered to volunteer. The director, a sharp-eyed woman in her 60s named Mrs. Carter, welcomed her immediately. "We've got a dozen kids who could use someone who listens," Mrs. Carter said. "That's rarer than you think." At first, Maya spent just a few hours a week there, helping with homework, organizing games, listening to the children's stories. She quickly realized many of them carried burdens far too heavy for their age: broken homes, absent parents, neighborhoods where safety was a luxury. One boy in particular, Jamal, reminded her of herself at 10 years old, quiet, watchful, always sitting near the edge of the group as if ready to run. It took 3 visits before he spoke more than a few words to her. When he finally opened up, it was about how he didn't trust anyone. "Sounds familiar," Maya told him with a small smile. "I used to feel that way, too. But trust isn't something you give away all at once. It's something you build, piece by piece." Back at the estate, Sophie took to asking about the center kids over dinner. "Can I meet them one day?" she asked. "Maybe," Maya said. "But they have their own lives, sweetheart. What matters is that they know there's someone out there for them." Richard watched the exchange with quiet pride. He could see how the work at the center was doing more than helping the children, it was helping Maya heal. One evening, as they sat in the library, Maya said, "I think I'm finally starting to feel like myself again. Not the person I was before all this, but someone stronger." "You are stronger," Richard said. "And you've changed this house, too." Sophie's happier. "I'm different." She tilted her head. "Different how?" "I've spent my life building things, businesses, investments. But lately, I've been thinking about building something else, something personal." There was a quiet moment between them, the fire casting warm light over their faces. Neither of them said the word, but the implication hung their family. The next weekend, Richard invited Mrs. Carter and a few of the center's staff to the estate for lunch. Maya cooked, Sophie helped set the table, and the afternoon was filled with conversation about expanding the youth programs. Richard offered funding, but Mrs. Carter was quick to remind him that what the kids needed most was time and presence, not just money. After they left, Maya stood on the veranda, watching the last of the cars disappear down the drive. "You didn't have to do that," she said. "I wanted to," Richard replied. "You've given so much of yourself to Sophie and to me. This is one way I can give back to what matters to you." That night, Sophie climbed into Maya's lap before bed. "I'm glad you're here," she said sleepily. "You make everything feel safe." Maya felt her throat tighten. That's what families do, Sophie. They make each other feel safe. In the quiet hour, after Sophie was asleep, Richard joined Maya in the kitchen, where she was rinsing the last of the dishes. I was thinking, he began, once spring comes, we should plant a bigger garden, one you can work on with the kids from the center if they want somewhere they can see something grow because of their hands. Maya smiled, picturing it. I like that, a place that starts small and gets stronger over time. He nodded. Exactly. As they turned out the lights and headed upstairs, Maya realized that this was what a new kind of normal looked like, not the absence of pain, but the presence of purpose. The scars were still there, but they were no longer marks of what had been lost. They were proof of what had been overcome. And in that quiet, steady way, the future didn't just seem possible, it seemed bright. Spring came early that year, carrying with it a softness in the air and the first hints of green along the hills surrounding the estate. True to Richard's word, the garden project began in earnest. It started with an empty stretch of land behind the main house, the soil dark and rich, waiting for new life. Maya stood there one Saturday morning with Sophie and a small group of children from the community center, each holding a packet of seeds. Richard had insisted on hiring a local landscaper to help prepare the ground, but the planting itself, he said, was for their hands alone. Remember, Maya told the children, crouching to their level, what you put in the ground today is going to take time. You can't rush it. You have to care for it, water it, protect it, just like you do with people you care about. Jamal, the boy who once spoke barely a word to her, nodded solemnly. He was the first to push his hands into the soil, letting the dirt crumble between his fingers before placing the seeds inside. Sophie mimicked him, chattering excitedly about how she was going to grow the biggest sunflower in the world. Richard watched from the porch, his arms folded, a faint smile on his face. He had seen a lot of investments in his life, but none had ever felt as meaningful as this, watching trust take root in the smallest of gestures. Over the following weeks, the garden became a living classroom. Maya taught the children how to read the signs of the plants, when the soil was too dry, when the leaves were asking for sunlight. They kept journals, sketching the tiny sprouts and noting the changes. But it wasn't just the plants that were growing. The children began opening up in ways Maya hadn't expected. Jamal started talking about his dream of becoming a veterinarian. A quiet girl named Leia shared that she wanted to be a chef, her voice barely above a whisper, but her eyes lit with excitement when Maya asked her about recipes she liked. One afternoon, as Maya was showing Leia how to mix compost into the soil, Richard joined them with a tray of lemonade. He handed glasses to everyone and lingered near Maya. I can't remember the last time this place felt so alive, he said quietly. That's because it's not just ours anymore, Maya replied. It belongs to them, too. Not everyone approved of the changes. A few neighbors had begun to gossip about outsiders coming onto the estate grounds. One evening at a local business event, Richard overheard a man muttering about how it's not smart to mix charity with your personal life. Richard's reply was cool and sharp. It's not charity, it's community. And if you don't understand the difference, I'm not sure we have much else to talk about.